Here we go again. It's another Oscar year. I'm Foxy Cellars, and I will be doing a review of the 2024 films, or should I say the 2025 Oscar nominated films for Best Picture. And I'm going to rank these from worst to best. Before I do, if you would, click like, click subscribe. You'll get keyed into other videos that I do just like this. Usually I'm talking about stories or I'm talking about movie reviews. In most cases, art. Let's get started. This year, a little lackluster. And with that said, I'd like to do another video that's going to talk about the Oscar snubs or, the Oscar films, all the films of 2024 that I loved that either didn't make the list and should have, or were just great movies, maybe not Oscar movies, but, didn't make the list. So I'm going to start off with the least, not so much the least worthy, but the least, for me, entertaining and the least of the thought-provoking pieces of art, and that being number 10, Nickel Boys.
So Nickel Boys had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 90, which is 7th overall. So critics did like it. And then it had an audience score of 76%, which was 8th overall. This was directed by Ramel Ross. It's listed as a historical drama. Nickel Boys is it's a good movie. Like, I'll give it that. I wasn't as compelled to love it as, maybe some of the critics and whatnot, but it follows two young black boys in Florida, I guess, and they're in reform school. So, it's got horrible things going on that, would go on in a reform school, and they have this nice relationship. But my problem with it is that it has this, it's POV. So it's from, and they tell two different stories of, one perspective of one boy and one of the other. And I find that the pacing, by breaking it up the way they did, just was a little disjointed. And that, if you've ever seen the movie Halloween, the introduction is very spooky and scary, where they have this concept where you are seeing it from the point of view of Michael Myers as a little boy, and he puts the mask over his face, and then he goes in and he kills his sister, and like, it's just creepy. But it was this small sliver of the movie that had a very specific impact. This did it the whole movie. Like, the entire movie is like that, and it's just jarring. And it took away from my experience of the story, which was a very good story. Number 9 is Dune Part 2, which was directed by Denis Villeneuve. And it's listed as a science fiction fantasy space opera. Dune had a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 92%, and the audiences liked it even more, with an audience score of 95%. Its critic score was ranked 5th overall of the 10 films, and its audience score was tied for 2nd. I probably liked this movie the least. I put it above Nickel Boys because it had a lot of things going for it presentation-wise. It had really great actors, top tier, of course. And then it had some really great special effects, some fighting scenes. I'm not buying these whole Messiah stories. It just doesn't. It doesn't fly with me. It feels forced. I was never a fan of it. Of course, the book. I never read the book, but the original David Lynch films from the 80s didn't. It was, those were slow. Of course, these I find, even though there's action in them, I found this and Part 1 to be very slow. I'm looking at my watch the whole time. I'm waiting for it to end. I just and by the way, most people loved this movie, so it's just falling low on the list for me. Number 8 is A Complete Unknown, which was directed by James Mangold. It's categorized as a musical biographical drama, which it is. Its Rotten Tomatoes critic score was 91%, which is 6th overall. And then its audience score was 95%, which is tied for 2nd with Dune and Wicked. I mean, full disclosure here, I'm not a Bob Dylan fan. So if you ask me, hey, should they make another Bob Dylan movie? Like, no, if they never made another Bob Dylan movie, I would be fine with it. If the last 3 weren't made, I would have been fine with it. But here's the thing. I give him all the credit in the world as being one of the greatest musical writers of all times. He's fantastic. All Along the Watchtower is one of the greatest songs ever. It's just, Jimi Hendrix was able to do it better. So with all that said, this is a very good biographical film. It did fall 8th on my list, but it was still, it's James Mangold. Here's the thing with him. And I love almost everything he's done, but I either like his movies or I love them. There's no kind of in between. He does a great job. So he's taking, a historical figure that I'm not that interested in, but clearly he's, got a lot to him. There's some interesting segments. Oh, and by the way, Timothée Chalamet this is a star. I mean, he is a star actor in Hollywood now. He's shown everybody what he's capable of. He's got 2 movies that are Best Pictures nominated for 2025. So, I mean, he's definitely an integral ingredient to greatness so far. So he knocks it out of the park. I mean, of course, if you're looking for what would be considered a good-looking Bob Dylan, he's him, and he's got the talent and the chops and everything. Ed Norton plays Pete Seeger, which was interesting. I was not that familiar with him. He was an interesting historical character musically. And then Johnny Cash, Boyd Holbrook, who plays Johnny Cash. This was kind of like the little gem in the movie. I loved every time. There wasn't enough of them, of course, but this was the Johnny Cash I wanted to see in Walk the Line. He's really great. And he had a different kind of attitude than in Walk the Line. And I love this version of him. It's probably the best cinematic version of Johnny Cash that I've seen so far. So, that's the silver lining to me in this film. Number 7 is Wicked by John M. Chu. This is a musical fantasy, of course. And its Rotten Tomatoes critics score was an 88, which is 9th overall, so not that good. The critics did not love this. I mean, it was liked by the critics, but it wasn't, of the 10. Its audience score was 95%, so it's tied for second, right along with Dune and Complete Unknown. So it was liked. The audience, they've spoken. So my take on it was, I liked it. I found this to be very entertaining. I went into this not wanting to like it really, but I liked it. So I had, before the musical came out, I had started to read the book. I wasn't into it. So I did not even, I think I got maybe a third into it. The musical came out, and I remember seeing the musical and going, wow, this was great. I loved it. I loved the songs. I loved the story. This version, and it's got some positives over the play. Its story veers a little bit, from the source material, especially from the book. But I found, a lot of what was different to be very entertaining. Cynthia Erivo, who played Elphaba, I liked her, and I didn't think I would like her. I mean, of course, her voice is just through the roof. And of course, Ariana Grande as Glinda. But here's my problem with some of these films. When they take, especially this is, I think, in the top 2 greatest villains of all times in The Wicked Witch of the West. And they're like changing, when they retcon these villains and their trajectory, I find it very problematic. And, when they had Anakin Skywalker in the Star Wars movies and they told this story about the little boy, and then, and then they got Boba Fett later on and, him as a little, and oh my God. Why do these people always have to be good? And they came from a place that was like, here's why they turned bad, but they were so good before and there was so much potential. I'm not buying it. I don't like it. The Wicked Witch of the West, there's no reason why she couldn't have always been an evil bitch. I don't want to hear that story. So that's my big problem with this. Other than that, she's the one I liked in the movie. She was probably my favorite character. And then when the wizard shows up, he's great. And it's colorful. I was, traditionally, I'm faithful to the original, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz story. And they take a lot of liberties retconning some of those storylines, especially with the monkeys, and they have. If you see the movie, you'll understand that it's not what there's no cap that controls them like in the books, and And then there's this disappointment when you get to the end. You're like, what? That's part one. Oh man, there's a part two. And they don't call it part one in this, of course, but because they did with Dune, but I liked Ariana Grande in it. She was great. However, I don't like that character. And it kind of flipped them around, because when you see The Wizard of Oz, you're like, oh, this is good and this is bad. And then it's reversed. So like, she's kind of a spoiled little bitch and not likable. And I don't feel like her trajectory got to where it needed to be. And it didn't need to be flipped like this. So I don't know. I mean, I've got a lot of problems with it, but these are things I should probably just let go of. Number 6 is Emilia Perez. This was directed by Jacques Audiard. Forgive me if I'm butchering his name. This is a musical crime drama. Yeah, go ahead and digest that for a second. And it had a critics score of 72%. Critics thought it was okay, but it was 10th overall. And then the audience score, the audience hated this movie. It has a 16%, which of course is last place. So it's last place as far as critics and audiences. I read a lot of the criticism against it, and I don't quite understand it, because I did find this movie to be, first of all, very novel, but really well done and interesting. And so I watched that. My mom recommended this movie to me. She's like, oh, you should see this. We just watched it. I loved it. And so I got 20 minutes into it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This, like, I mean, it was a musical and it's all in Spanish and I didn't know what was going on quite, but it eased into it, after that. I stopped watching it after 20 minutes because, life goes on. But then I went back to it. And then I don't know if my mood changed or what it was, but the rest of the movie completely compelled me to watch further. The musical part of it is not that distracting. It blends kind of well. It's, it's also the palette is very dark. So it has this feel to it, and the music, it matches it. But the theme, and you do need to suspend some disbelief with what's going on here. So the concept is it's a drug cartel, the lord of a drug cartel, who feels like he's a woman. So he hires this lawyer, Rita Moreno Castro. She's played by Zoe Saldana, who played Gamora in the Marvel movies, to investigate who's the best person to give this drug lord a sex change. This is all the setup, and then he becomes a woman. He becomes Emilia Perez and hides out for a while, and then reemerges. But his reemergence, and this is, I found the arc of this film to be what really attracted me to it, which is that he went from the most horrible, fear-mongering drug lord to somebody that helped the community. And I mean, really helped the community. I mean, they were finding all of these missing people, helping the families grieve with this, putting together foundations. And, I'm not going to give it away, but, I was extremely fascinated. This is unique. It might not stand the test of time, so who knows? But especially with critics hating it. But I was very fascinated by it. Number 5 is The Substance. And this was directed by Carolee Fargeet. I'm butchering that name as well. I apologize. I'm not familiar with a lot of these directors. I am familiar with some of them, but not all of them. This is a psychological horror film, and it is a psychological horror film. It had a Rotten Tomatoes score, critic score of 89%, and its audience score was 75, and that was ranked 8th and 9th, respectively. I know that they've done some movies somewhat of this topic nature, whatnot, but this one stands alone. It's almost like a deal with the devil, and that clearly as the benefits of the deal unfold over time, you realize that this is not a good deal. I might not have been nuanced enough to understand who the true bad guy is in this, except for, of course, her younger self. The deal that's made, we never really find out who this is. So it's a deal with the devil almost in my eyes, because you don't know who this organization is that she makes this deal with. She's just an aging actress who wants to be younger. So she finds out about this so-called substance and she starts to take it, and it creates a younger version of herself. that gets time to, they have to trade off. There's rules that need to be followed. And I find that interesting because every time there's rules, it's almost like 101 of storytelling, where it's like you create rules, then you break the rules, and here's the consequences of those. And instead of it being like, end this and then end that, is like, but then you did this and that caused this. And really great exercise in writing, if you ask me. I loved where this went, and there's one really painful theme, and that's the damage that is done, and the true villain of the story is your younger self. So it's almost like regret. So the younger self is this little bitch who's just causing so much trouble, and she's making it worse for her older self because every time she breaks the rules, the other one becomes more of a mutant of sorts, I guess, is what I'll call it. And the more and more she abuses this privilege, the more and more you feel as if, oh my God, my younger self is just terrible, and everything that's wrong or bad or terrible that's going to happen to me is because of my younger self. And it's deep-seated, and it's very subtle the way this thread is weaved throughout the whole movie, but it's there, and I feel what makes this movie as brilliant as it is. Number 4 is The Brutalist, directed by Brady Corbett. This one has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 94, which is second overall, so it's up there. And then it has the audience score is 80%, which is 7th overall. So if you don't have plans to see this movie, you don't need to see this movie. It is literally brutal on many levels. If you plan on seeing this movie, and I had to think about this, whether or not I wanted to spoil this movie, because my motto in every other one of these reviews is not to give too much away, and then I say something vague. This one, I don't know how to do this without absolutely spoiling this movie, so I'm going to spoil this movie. So if you do plan on seeing this movie, please just skip ahead to number 3. Otherwise, here we go. I mean, so there's a lot. Let's unpack. So there's a lot here that is really brilliant. It's great it has these nuggets throughout. I did not like this movie, but I was very impressed with aspects of this movie. Now, it's done so well as seemingly a biography. You think that it is. It's not. It's a fictionalized period drama. That's what it's categorized as genre-wise. But the trials and tribulations of this character are fleshed out realistically. You feel for him. You understand he's an immigrant coming to the country. He has this brilliance that they dial down. It's very subtle each time that they expose his true brilliance as an architect. I really loved that. They didn't hit that note too hard. There's this point in this movie where they go to Italy and they're looking at the marble that they want to use as their material for the building that they're building. And I really related to this scene. I found it very interesting. I had read The Agony and the Ecstasy, which was this novel all about Michelangelo. And there's a couple of chapters in the book where he spends a good chunk of his younger life in these quarries looking at marble, these exact same quarries in Italy. And I related to that because I found it to be genuine, the work that they went into to source the material that they're using for this. Anyway, there is this point, and it's not like it's a predictable story up to this point, but it's following along a path that makes sense. And then, bam, out of nowhere, one main character, and there's a lot of main characters, so I'm not giving that part away, but one main character walks up from behind another main character and just butt fucks him. Like, not metaphorically speaking, literally rapes another character out of the blue. And the reason I had to point this out as a spoiler was because it takes the plot and it butt fucks the trajectory of it. There's like, it completely changes everything. This one rape scene that occurs changes everything and makes. I remember, so I watched this at home, and I remember standing up in the middle of the room going, wait, what the hell is going on? What just happened? Like, it just threw everything out the window and changed the plot of this movie. It was disturbing, but it was also just like, if you were falling asleep, this just shook the shit out of you. Now, it made the very end of the movie because, things are following a certain path and there's not like, one thing happening after another. It all of a sudden becomes this massive cause and effect that has repercussions that became dynamic and interesting in the last less than a third of the movie. And now, I can't say that I liked this movie. I have this movie as high up as I have it because it has all of these gems of greatness. This is a Best Picture nominated film. This is probably the movie that's going to win Best Picture. I would say if I'm a gambling man, this is probably number one. But I've got it fourth, as in its greatness. Did I like it fourth? No, but it's a compelling piece that's you can't ignore some of the threads. There's actually this one. The brilliance in it is all over. It really is. So that's why it is as high as it ups. There's just one scene where, the one main character is talking to another main character, and there's conflict in what they're deciding. And you think that because the main character, Adrian Brody, he's very brilliant. And you think that he's going to give you this nugget of just genius. And he calls one character over and he's like, come here. It sounds like they're going to work things out. And he's going to give this like just soliloquy of poetic brilliance on life. And he's like, look, there's ugly in the world and there's terrible and there's awfulness and there's tragedy. But most importantly, there's ugliness. And you're responsible for it. And it just flips it right back at him like, no, I'm not a nice guy. I'm not going to work with you. I think you are pig scum. I didn't see that coming. That was a flip on it. It was a big surprise. It was comedic in a way, not intentionally comedic, but there's just brilliant script writing in that. It's just the movie was too long, frankly. But there you have it. Number 3 is Conclave, directed by Edward Berger. It's noted as being a political thriller. It had a critic score of 93%, and it had an audience score of 86%. Its critic score was third place, or tied for third place with Anora, and its audience score is ranked 6th overall. Conclave is another one of those films where I didn't think I was going to like it going into it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do feel it'd almost be. I'm looking forward to seeing it again because it feels like it's going to have even greater value on a second watch. I mean, this is the most simple of the movies that were nominated in my eyes, in that it's your just basic crime thriller, and you've got to follow the threads of the plot as you go along. Characters change, your opinion of characters change. Some have an arc. Stanley Tucci in it. He's always awesome. I do love him in anything he's in, but his character, you like him, you don't like him, you like him, you don't like him, and some of these characters come around. John Lithgow is his usual wonderful self, but you've got to ask questions about his character throughout it, and Ralph Fiennes is. He makes some really great choices. He really does. I would say this is one of his greatest movies. He's just really good in it. Some of the company that he keeps in this is what really impressed me. But this is just your standard crime thriller that has some interesting twists and turns that will deliver. Number 2 is I'm Still Here, directed by Walter Salles. The genre of this is marked as a political biographical drama. It has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 97%, and it has an audience score of 97%. So that makes the critics and the audience score both first place. This is just no explanation, just takes him away. We're going to ask him some questions, and then they never see him again. He was an architect, and I guess he's like some sort of congressman There's this emotional blow early on that's very powerful. And Fernanda is stuck keeping this household to life and the love of that and whatever that is. So it's also like it's effortless, and there's like a clear affirmation of how Walter Sales' natural talent to paint a beautiful, moving family picture is unfolded. And I really love this as just as an art piece. It's just it's so well done, but you do feel everything that's going on. That's why I'm putting this at number 2. I do think this could be the film that wins. It's one of the two. For one, for me, was Honora by Sean Baker. It's listed as a comedy drama, but it wasn't very funny. But it's good. I felt it to be really good. See, here's the thing. 1, 2, and 3. These all 3 could have gone either way, or even 4. I think my top 4 here are all equal in some way. On this day of all days, today I picked Honora to be number 1. It's simple, a lot like Conclave. A completely different plot, of course, but it has a simplicity. I hear critics relate it to Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler, and I wanted to come up with something on my own to say it's more like this, but that's what it is. That's what it's like. It is a lot like that. I mean, the plot's not the same, but the emotional trajectory that you experience is just like it. It follows this. I think it was Atlantic City. It was a prostitute that meets up with this Russian. He's a Russian prince or of royalty or whatnot. He's very wealthy, and he's a spoiled little fucking son of a bitch. And you don't like him, but she falls in love with him, and they go off to Vegas and they get married and they come back, and he's hiding this from his family. And as soon as his family finds out, they show up, and all hell breaks loose. And it goes from a chaotic love story that's just, it's unbound, and then boom, it turns into a crime thriller where she gets kidnapped by them and forced to do. They want an annulment and all that, and it's very nerve wracking. But damn, was this a good movie? I felt that this was sensational. Its critic score was a 93%. Its audience score was an 89%. Its critic score was tied for 3rd, and its audience score was 5th place. So it's right in the middle, but this is the one that I think immediately when I was done watching the movie, I was like, wow, that was great. And the other ones, I can't say I necessarily felt that way. Like maybe The Substance, I felt similar, and I'm Still Here, and Amelia Perez a little bit, but as you digest some of these films, you think differently over time. And I've always found the more you think about a movie afterwards, even you ever see a movie you don't like, and then you think about it for a while, it changes your perspective on it, because you're like, well, the creator, the storyteller made you think, and there's something there. This happened to be, I did like it, and I thought about it a lot, and there was just a lot going on. Mickey Madison, who plays the main character in this, she's just so compelling, and really was the driving force to make this as great as it was. I forgot what the kid's name, the actor who played the kid, but he's just awful. You like what a piece of shit this guy is. I mean, he's just like, oh, I don't know. I can't even say it, but anyway, that it's the classic Cinderella story that doesn't go in the same direction as Cinderella goes. So there you have it. There's my review and my ranking order of the nominated films for Best Picture. I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully some of my favorites, or even the one that I picked to be the Oscar winner, is the Oscar winner when the Oscars roll around this coming week. If this was your opportunity to check out some of these films that you hadn't gotten the chance to see, and see where they landed, and then see where they're going to fall in the Oscars coming up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning into my channel to hear my reviews on them. If you would, go ahead, click like if you liked it. Click subscribe, because you will get notified of other videos just like this.
and then hang in there because I am going to do my review and then my list of the 10 that I think either should have been nominated or they were just, hey, here's the they might not even be 10. Let's see what happens when I do the list. But the movies that I thought were the best of 2024 coming up next.